$1.38 a serving. That's what this meal is going to cost you to prepare. But we're not cutting down on quality, folks. This is a meal that you'll be glad to have. It served our ancestors during the Great Depression, and it can serve you as well. Today we're celebrating the history of cooking during the Great Depression. Way back in 1929, when the stock market crashed, there were so many people that were left unemployed, so many people that didn't have a job, so many people that didn't even have a house or a place to live. And at the time, President Hoover was in office when all this took place, but stuff was really bad then. People were knowing that they might not make it. Where would their next meal come from? Sleeping on the sidewalks, on wooden sidewalks with newspapers covering them up as blankets, also known as Hoover blankets. People were lining up at what they called soup kitchens, you know, and that's just any place that could serve any kind of broth or anything. A lot of it didn't even have meat in it. Like I say, during President Hoover's time that this took place, it soon became known as we could add a little more to this and call it Hoover stew. There's a lot of knockoffs to Hoover stew recipe, but back then, I just want to give you an idea of what it cost back then. Anywhere from 15 to 30 cents to feed a person. The original recipe that started so many years ago was just macaroni, dried noodles, stewed tomatoes, and hot dogs. When they found out that they were putting hot dogs in this, calling it Hoover stew, they were celebrating this as a luxurious meal at the time because it actually had meat in it. Now sure, we're going to change it up just a tad, but we're going to keep it pretty traditional in its way, and I think we ought to get started and celebrate the history of the Great Depression. Well, I took me a stock pot, put some water in there, heated it over them little coals, poured me in a package of that large elbow macaroni. We're just going to cook this till it's sort of al dente. It's still got a little crunch to it because remember, it's going to have to simmer again. Stir it occasionally, pull it off before it gets plumb done because it's going to get to cooking some more. Didn't take long for that macaroni to get done cooking right over them hot coals of mesquite, it didn't. And you notice that we're cooking here just like they'd have probably cooked it in them shanty towns. Just hang it over a fire and go to cooking. And that's burning anything from wooden pallets to newspaper to cardboard, whatever they could make a fire with. After that, I took some kielbasa sausage and I sliced it into what my mother would call coins, which are pretty thin, they are. And speaking of coins, it was so tight and so hard to make a living during that Great Depression era that they weren't only pinching pennies, they said they were pinching them till Lincoln cried. But I take that kielbasa, like I say, slice it up really thin, put it in a Dutch oven hanging right over the fire, add one small yellow onion to it, diced up. Now, a lot of these folks might have had a garden that they could add a little more to this. Some put corn in it, some put beans in it, whatever you had, but some of it didn't have no meat. Some of it was just stewed tomatoes and macaroni. And folks, that's pretty cheap eating right there, but it was something that would warm their belly to let them go they could do one more day. Maybe we can just make it one more day. You know, I was using kielbasa sausage and you see me put it in that Dutch oven. They didn't sear theirs this way. I'm getting a little more flavor out of that sausage by doing it this way. They would cook the macaroni down, put in the stewed tomatoes, throw the hot dogs in there sliced up, let it simmer for just till it all got warm, and serve it. Now, hot dogs, kielbasa sausage, you could use a breakfast sausage of any kind. You could use bacon in this. You could even use ground beef or wild game. Whatever you had at the time to get a little burn in your belly to let you know, hey, I might can sleep under that newspaper blanket one more night. We got a commercial break right here. We have a rabbit over here in the old chicken pen.
Hang on. Oh, he just got out. And he's, oh.
Well, we drained that elbow macaroni we did, got the water off of it, and added us a little oil to keep it from sticking together. And while that's sitting over there minding its own business, we finished cooking that meat till it was browned up just a little, and them onions were good and tender. Next, we're gonna add us 2 cans of canned beans and 2 cans of stewed tomatoes. Now, you get any kind you wanna get. I picked up the Mexican variety today because I think it's gonna give a little flavor, and they didn't have them diced. So you'll see when I put these tomatoes in there, I'm gonna take this spatula and I'm gonna chop them up a little to where they're more like bite-sized bites. So let me get these beans in there. A lot of folks could add corn to it. You can put one in there, whatever you need, but keep it cheap. That's the ideal of Hoover stew. You mix in all them beans and chop up them tomatoes well in there, and then you add your drained macaroni to it, and I'm gonna let it simmer about 15 to 20 minutes to get all them flavors incorporated in there really well. You'll get some more juice out of that tomato that way by letting it cook that long. But as you look at this dish, it sort of reminds me, and maybe this evolved into what my mother and them had us eating when we were younger, and that was what we called goulash. It just substituted really the hot dogs or the kielbasa for a little bit of ground meat or some wild game or something like that. But you know, when we get to talking about the shanty towns back during Hoovervilles, there was really 2 cities that really shined more than anybody else to have the largest populations were Seattle and St. Louis. St. Louis was even so prosperous in their little shanty town that they even had a mayor that they elected over all their little shanty town, and they built a church out of orange crates so they could have church service. Now there were others scattered across the United States. There was, and another really large one that had a lot of World War I vets coming back to it was up there at Washington, D.C. So these people learned to get through hard times. They did. That Great Depression, my dad went through that. So it's something that really made a tougher generation of people. I don't think there's been a generation born since then that will ever be as tough as those people that went through all this hardship. There were a lot of things that were associated back to President Hoover during this town of Hoovervilles. They even had Hoover shoes. They would take cardboard when the soles of their shoes were wearing out so much and tie them onto the bottom of their shoes to where they could have something that they could walk a little easier. But also they had Hoover flags. People would walk around in them soup kitchens and they would take their pockets and they'd turn them inside out. This was known as Hoover flags to let everybody know how poor they was. It was hard times, it was. I'm glad I didn't have to go through them, but I'm glad I know some of the people that did that passed the lessons on down to me. Looks like a pretty delectable dish to me, and I guarantee you to them folks that was going through all them hard times during the Depression would have thought this was a gourmet meal. It is. Now I've let this cool just a little, but I am going to have me a bite right here with some of all the players inside.
No, you haven't had this before, have you?
I've never made it this way. I mean, I've made a lot of goulash and stuff like this, but really, to me, this is really good with the Polish sausage like it is, the kielbasa.
Is there anything that you would like maybe change or add?
I would probably, you know me, I'd add some green chili to it.
Oh.
But I'm thinking right here at the end, if a man just had some grated cheese to put on that bowl right there, it would be some pretty fine dining, it would. Back then, this meal was costing about anywhere between, I'd say 10 cents to 25 cents per person to come by. Now I figured it up today with what we put in there. We're still getting $1 and about 31 cents per serving with a meal like this. Pretty cheap meal when you figure it that way. It makes me want to do maybe the Shantytown Shuffle. Got to do yes, I like it, I do, Snows. But I've had a little bit of help today. Who wants to help? Who wants to help?
Maggie.
Duker said he's gonna help. Lulu, you was after the rabbit. Big, old timer, good job. And mate, since you've been helping the most today, you get 2 bites. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed this. I always like to go back and relive some history or learn about something that I didn't know about. And you know, that generation there were truly people, as my dad said, that went through the Dust Bowl that had true grit. They knew how to survive. And I still, folks, I've told you before, but I'll tell you every time too, them folks were the strongest generation of people that I've ever witnessed or known in my lifetime, because I've heard a lot of their stories that they went through, and it was just very touching. And times may get hard now, but you got family around you, you got friends, you got me and Shan, so we are your family. You can make it through this. Cook you up some Hoover stew, share it with your neighbors. If you don't know them, just take some over and knock on that door and say, we're going to Hooverville tonight, you're invited. We're gonna give you some Hoover stew. Also, folks, we need to be very mindful, we do, and I want you to lift them up in prayer. And that's all those folks up there in the Texas Panhandle that have been affected by those fires, burnt millions and millions of acres. Lots of cattle have been lost, lots of grass, lots of fence. Pray for them folks, pray for rain, and you know, them people, they got grit up there in the Panhandle. I know they'll make it too, so keep them in your thoughts and prayers. But it is with great pride and honor and privilege that I tip my hat to all the servicemen and women and all the veterans that have kept that old flag a-flying, no matter where we're at. Rest of you, come on in here close. Hurry up now, because I'm getting ready to eat. God bless you, each and every one, and I'll see you down the Hoover Stew Trail.